Yeah, so we're excited to be here with you all today. This is our, I think, sixth event in the past 2 months. We've been back to back to back, building community all across the country in over 15 cities in the United States, even going abroad to London. Sam is by far one of the higher caliber speakers we've had in the past few months. I think he's going to draw some amazing insights from his experience at Square, and we're excited to be here moderating his discussion today. Sam is a co-founder of the original founding team at Square, now Block. And let's get into it. Ken, if you want to ask the first question.
I personally love Fireside. I'm like a podcast junkie, Tim Ferriss. And I just love the origin story. Like, Sam, where were you born? Where were you raised? Like, tell me about the early parts of Sam. How do your parents influence you? Just give us the background.
Sure. Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm not much of a speaker. My background is in engineering, so you have to excuse some of my awkwardness. I'm not by nature a speaker, so I'm happy to talk a little bit about my life. I actually think this might be the first time that somebody has asked me about it, but yeah, here we are. So I'm Chinese by nationality. I was born in China, Western China. So if anybody has seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, like that dude who takes like the main female actress to the desert, like that desert is where I'm from. So also known as, I guess, the place where like perhaps they're subjugating the Uyghurs and making iPhones. But I digress. That's where I'm from. The most notorious thing about my city is that it's like the one major city that is the farthest from any ocean on Earth. So it's a city called Urumqi. It's in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region in Western China. So my family was moved there because it's like, hey, look, we're going to move a bunch of Han Chinese into the region, and look, this must be China now. So that's how China obtained Xinjiang, and that's how my parents ended up there. So I was born there. As you can imagine, not a ton of opportunities there. China was still reeling kind of from Cultural Revolution and whatnot. My parents were in higher education, and the way I ended up in the U.S. was them basically taking the opportunity, from what I understand, a bunch of especially Chinese scholars in the 80s to come to the U.S. And so they immigrated to West Virginia. They came. My mom came when I was 6 months old. My dad came when I was 1 year old. And then once they saved up enough money, they sent for me, and I came when I was 4 in 1990. So my first home in the U.S. was in Morgantown, West Virginia. Go Mountaineers. I don't imagine any of you guys are from West Virginia or WVU, but that's where my parents were from. I used to speak like a hick. I used to have I used to speak like this, and you just end up speaking like the people around you. My second grade teacher told me to stop that, and now I speak like this. So anyways, that's kind of the origin story, how I ended up in the US. We kind of bumped around a little bit, eventually ended up in the suburbs of DC, which is where I spent from third grade until I went to college. Went to college in the Midwest, and then bumped into some of the co-founders of Square, and that's how I started my startup journey.
And how did you get involved in technology? Like, I know I read that you got into video games, you're hacking early.
Yeah, I'm a huge video game player. I was literally playing like Counter-Strike before I came here. I'm addicted to opening boxes. Like I don't have that much money invested in my Steam profile, but I don't know if anybody here works at Valve, but I've probably helped pay for your salary. But yeah, I was a huge video game player. I mean, it's almost a cliche story for, I guess, my generation at this point, but couldn't really afford games, so discovered QBasic. That was part of every standard install of Windows. Started learning how to program around middle school, and then I was fortunate to be in a location where there was a magnet school where they taught math, science, and computer science. So I started learning that in middle school. Capstone project was to make a video game. So that's really how I started being interested in technology. When I was thinking about going to college, my parents told me that, all the programming jobs are getting outsourced. So you probably shouldn't learn programming. So that's why I ended up picking up electrical engineering and computer engineering. So that's how I got involved in tech. Yeah.
Before I get into this origin of the Square story, you joining Jack and Jim, What's one thing we could not find on Google about Sam Wynn?
Oh, man, should I? All right, I mean, I'm married, okay, whatever. Here, so one of Square's early investors is MC Hammer.
Oh, nice.
That was the first time I ever like had a burnout was at Square. And so the story for this was we were making the iPad app. We were going to be a launch partner with the iPad. We were building this like, fancy new payment terminal. And like totally got burnt out doing that. Part of the reason was, Apple was very secretive with their pre-production iPads. They came to our office with like these black suitcases handcuffed to their, like it was like absolutely insane. And then they took a closet in our office. They built 2 tables into that office, and then they chained the iPads to this table. And 6 people at the company were allowed to go into that room. And we had plenty of Apple engineers at our company, so they knew that Apple would intermittently check to make sure that we were fulfilling our side of the contract. So I basically worked in a closet for 9 weeks, and just completely depleted my vitamin Ds. And it was bad, and I burnt out. Anyways, this leads up to me like breaking up with my girlfriend at the time. And then I decided after I burnt out that I wanted to marry her. And then I asked MC Hammer to help me propose to her. And there's a private video, which I'm not going to make public.
I saw it.
Did you see it?
I think you should.
Oh, shit. I have a private video on YouTube of MC Hammer proposing to the person who's not now currently my wife.
Oh, wow.
Don't worry, she knows about this. She's seen it. This is not like that private, but yeah, that's the thing you won't find on Google. Anyhow, moving on.
This is the gold I was digging. Take the mic back. This is the gold I was digging for. So you launched Square alongside Jim McKelvey, Jack Dorsey. What was your role in that founding trio? How'd you get involved? How'd you meet the guys? And then maybe how did your background complement theirs?
So I met them, basically I was working in defense. When you grow up near DC, there's a lot of opportunities to work in defense. And so my school, again, was this sort of nerdy magnet school. And so we were all required to do research. That's how I ended up in defense. Anyhow, this actually ties back to MC Hammer a little bit. So when I got my first job, I worked at Raytheon where I worked on drones. And then I found an opportunity to move to St. Louis to work at Boeing. And the girlfriend that I asked MC Hammer, anyways, that girlfriend lived in St. Louis. So I moved to St. Louis to work at Boeing. An incident happened where I had to like debug a bomb. And for all the developers, like defense contractors are just the absolute crappiest like technical places to work at. I never used like Microsoft SourceForge. I don't know if I might be offending some people here if you worked at Microsoft and or on SourceForge, but like SourceForge is a piece of crap, right? And like they had no idea what code they had shipped. They had no code, they had no idea what code was actually on the bomb. And so at one point, bombs were just like blowing up for no reason, right? And we literally drew straws to see who would go debug these bombs. And this is St. Louis, like the Asian guy like draws the short straw, right? So I'm going to Whiteman Air Force Base in the middle of Missouri to plug in this thing. It was like the great granddaddy of like USB. It's called 1553, MIL 1553. Plugging that into JDAMs, wearing like that stupid suit from Hurt Locker that like will not like save you, and pulling data off of bombs. And that's when I decided it was time to like move out of the industry. So so this is a very long story, but I was going to grad school because I thought grad school was the way out of defense. And my professor introduced me to Jim McKelvey, who's like a big name in St. Louis. His father was the dean of engineering at Washington University, which is where I went. And he's just this, like Jim McKelvey, I have a ton of admiration for because he's, like if you imagine the classic entrepreneur, that's Jim McKelvey. Like he's a computer scientist who got mad at his professor when he was learning computer science and wrote like a Fortran book that made his professor look like an idiot. And then he decided that he was going to become like a world-class glassblower. So he studied under Chihuly and became a glassblower. And then he like decided that he wanted to fly planes. Like he's just like crazy, right? But he's also just like one of the most grounded people that I've ever met. And I'm very fortunate that I met him so young, and he was very, very formative for my career and my outlook on life. But yeah, Jim McKelvey was how I got my foot into the company. A professor introduced us. We met. I started working on the side. After I got off of work at Boeing, I would go home and I would work on iOS stuff. I would work on hardware stuff. I would work on signal processing stuff. No.
Amazing. So what are the biggest technical challenges that you had to solve early on? Kind of, I know startups, most startups fail, and tell us about the early days of how you guys executed.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about ways that we could have failed. So, there was a distinct memory of a moment when we were building the company and Jim was reading through some rule books, and then he just like exclaimed, "What we're doing is illegal. We have to dissolve the company." And I just moved to San Francisco, and so he was reading kind of through the payment industry rule book, like PCI compliance and a number of other things. And he basically misread it and thought we were dead, but we were in fact not dead, so we figured that out. Another thing that nearly killed us is PayPal came into our office at one point and offered to acquire us for I can't remember what the money was, but they offered to acquire us. That could have killed us. What else could have killed us? I mean, we could have just not gotten any investment. I mean, we got our first investor was actually Khosla Ventures. Vinod was not the partner. Our partner was a guy named Gideon Yu at the time. That might not have worked out. Another big thing that most people don't know was Jack had just been fired from Twitter when we began Square. Like this was like his rebound, right? And he spent an awful lot of time trying to build on Twitter during that time. Like he was kind of on a press tour and he wasn't spending a lot of time on Square. That could have killed us. But eventually he sort of, got his head straight from the sequence of events that led him to depart Twitter, and wrote our first server. So yeah, I mean, there was a bunch of things that nearly killed us. I don't know. I don't know if we had a playbook for how we navigated that. It was just, at some point, you just have to get your head straight and, stop doing random things and focus on the business.
So many would say Square's early product market fit might have been the device you plugged into the iPhone aux jack to swipe cards, right? And when you think about that moment, did you realize early on that this could make the company, like this product, as convoluted as the hardware construction might have been, make Square into the giant it's become today?
I think that was that started off as a very pragmatic decision. So we had no intention of making hardware, or actually before they brought me on, there was no intention to make hardware, right? And at some point they determined that they needed the hardware. That determination came from the fact that there were already some companies trying to enable payments off of your phone at that time, and they would use like OCR to read the numbers off of your credit card or a check or whatever, right? And that just freaked people out, right? And the realization there was that there was this psychological component. We're all comfortable with like a server at a restaurant taking your credit card, going out back to charge it. We're fine with that, even though like they could totally be like stealing your information, right? But like something new, it just freaks people out. So the reason why we began doing the hardware was that we decided that we needed to create this gentle on-ramp into some new behavior. So we needed to make it really cheap because our intention was to give it away for free. I think Jack really idolizes Steve Jobs, so he was like, "Oh, we got hardware, like let's make it beautiful and wonderful and magical." And so he started, and so we really took that to heart, and so we worked very hard on the industrial design. The circuitry is like stupid simple, right? It's an LR circuit, right? It's like the next thing you learn after you learn about an RC circuit. What was difficult about building that was really around the signal processing. So I studied electrical engineering and signal processing as a sub discipline of that field, and like everything you learn about it did not apply to the first iPhone, because the first iPhone's hardware was crap, right? So like you're like, oh, all I need to do is take like a fast Fourier transform on the signal, and then like I can identify like where the peaks are, and like and then I can figure out what the data reads. You could not take a fast Fourier transform on those initial phones. So what we had to do was, we did a bunch of kind of brute force time domain analysis in order to like get an algorithm that worked quickly and accurately. So that was more difficult than the actual hardware. What we also learned was like all of the intricacy, like maybe not intricacy is the wrong word, but like all of the idiosyncrasies of building a headphone jack, because every iPhone had different impedance levels, and it just like screwed with our signal, and then we had to like update the algorithm, and so there was a lot of, for me at least, was very interesting to learn like real world electrical engineering is often a lot more ghetto than what you learn in in school.
Did you get a patent for that? And also during dinner, you moved to China actually to even help with production, right?
Yeah. So I did get several patents on that. And yeah, my first exposure to learning how to do manufacturing, we went to China, and that really drove home. I think it really drove home how different the real world is from the programming world. Like programming world has pretty well-defined constraints, and then like if something in the real world happens, like your server's on fire, it's like really hard to debug, right? Because we're like, as programmers, we're like, you tend to be so used to this, like, oh, just catch the exception, right? Like, yeah, server on fire exception, like great, like let's catch that. But yeah, I mean, for us, this was like before we used AWS. We had a colo, and one day somebody at the colo, this is not anti-environmentalist, but like they were very environmentally conscious, and they were like, why do we have the air conditioning on? It's going to be the weekend, there's nobody at the office. So they turned it off, and servers were literally on fire, and we're like, we can't SSH into our servers, I don't understand. And it's like, oh, it's because they're on fire, and you can't SSH into computers that are on fire. So, in terms of manufacturing, that was another thing where like it just, I don't know, it was like my growth as an engineer. We discovered that if you don't have proper ventilation in a factory, first of all, people can breathe it in and they can, like very bad things can happen. But also like it'll screw up your yields because you can get evaporated metal that will condense in other parts of the factory and create shorts. And so, we did a lot of work in China. Again, we were not Apple, so we had the most ghetto factory. Like, I just remember this factory had like this bathroom that was just always flooded for some reason. There was like one spot in the men's bathroom that was dry, so you had to like stand on one leg to use the bathroom. It's just like, yeah, we went through hell. But it was awesome, but we went through hell.
Well, you got to this point in the company's journey, right? And then how did you architect scalability in terms of not only the hardware but the UX design of everything? How did you really get that scalability in place?
Yeah, I mean, some would argue we didn't really architect for scalability initially. I mean, we chose Ruby on Rails as our development stack. That was like the hot thing at the time, huge developer productivity, super slow programming language. We weren't sure if we were going to get to the scale where the compute would cost us a lot of money. So we're like, screw it, let's go for productivity instead. And most of the bottlenecks are around the database anyways. So we didn't think too much about scalability. We had this there's this weird event that happened where I guess like Jack got invited to speak on Oprah, and we were like researching the Oprah effect, like what that would do. It's like the Reddit effect,
Yeah,
right? Like how
yeah.
it might crash your website. So we're like, holy crap, we got to scale this. So we just had a week where we hacked on scaling everything. So everything from like sharding our database, like far earlier than we needed to do it, to thinking about sort of durable, like multi-data center. Like we did a bunch of that way too early. And like the ironic thing was, Oprah had invited also Mark Zuckerberg. So Mark Zuckerberg got to speak, and Jack just kind of stood in the background and didn't get to speak. So we never got the Oprah effect.
Oh, wow.
But so we spent a lot of time kind of scaling specific parts of Ruby on Rails, right? That was the solution that we used. So Ruby on Rails has a notorious problem around database access. We hacked together some stuff into kind of the core libraries to like make database access a little like less crappy. And we did a number of things. We did a number of things like that to get to the scale that we needed.
Jack Dorsey, like this, I have a pretty loud voice, so
There you go. No,
he's
you're
a pretty iconic
got it.
founder. Oh. But yeah, give us some juicy Jack Dorsey stories.
Oh man.
Like, is he a robot? Like, what's Android? Like, give us some interesting.
So what I will
stories.
say is that Jack is, like, I admire Jack a lot, but he's not like as personable. So one of the things that I really admire about him is that he's very intelligent, but but he's also like very cognizant of what he's not good at or what he doesn't know. So when you see him on TV, he's like seems like somebody you might want to hang out with. That's media training. Media training is amazing, and he's somebody who was very receptive to media training because he understood that he's like a freaking robot, right? Like he's like not a, he doesn't call people humans, he calls them humans, right? Like that's kind of his personality, and it's very endearing, but not super palatable when it comes to the press and whatnot. So that's kind of one example of just him being able to like be self-reflective in spite of being a billionaire, in spite of like if you imagine somebody in his position, like everybody's trying to either befriend him or they're trying to say something controversial to him to try to hoping one of those things will result in like a lasting connection, and people in that position will kind of close themselves off, and he was never that way. So yeah, I mean, working with him was really eye-opening. He was very intelligent. He is a robot.
Did he ever give you a massage? So do you guys know the story that Jack Dorsey was actually trained to be a masseuse? If you go to the Stanford E-Corner, he had 10,000 hours of massage, and he actually wanted to be a masseuse. So I was wondering to code faster.
I don't think he ever offered. I think he's been through a company before, so he was like well aware of the HR consequences of doing such a thing. But he did pay for a massage after I got burnt out, and then did my silly things. But no, I mean he's a multi-talented person. He's kind of weird, right? Like one of the things that he really loved to do was make programs that would like kill itself. It was like poetry and programming, and I'm like, okay, I mean.
Like, what do you mean?
Cool,
I don't get it.
cool,
Like,
cool.
what do you mean programming that would kill
Like
itself?
he would make a program that would like do one thing, and then it would just destroy itself. Yeah. So that was a thing. He also liked to make dresses. That was another thing. Like that was actually one of the reasons why he got fired from Twitter. He would leave the office at like 5 and go attend a dressmaking class. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with making dresses, but it's just like, dude, when you're like the CEO of Twitter, like maybe you should stop. Maybe you should run, right? So like I kind of get it, but at the same time, like he's multi-talented.
And what about, like, I think for startups, right, it's all about, even if a great product, if nobody knows about you, so distribution is very important. We're going to have Greg talk about how he became a top creator on LinkedIn with 200,000 plus followers. But what are some of the interesting, like, growth marketing tactics or strategies you guys, tested so Square could just have product market fit and go IPO?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to give advice on like how Square became known, right? Because Jack Dorsey is a big personality. He spent an awful lot of time around sort of the PR aspects of, him, and Twitter, and then also later on him and Square, right? So everybody wanted to interview him because of Twitter, and he would sort of inject a little bit about Square into those interviews, and so that part of it like definitely helped, and that's like I don't know what to tell. Like, there's no advice there, right? It's like, oh yeah, go find a billionaire and like have him help you out a little bit with PR. I mean, if you can do it, right? Like that's gonna be awesome. But the other main big advantage of him having been on the founding team of Twitter is, I mean, Twitter attracted all of the celebrities. Like that was one of the big things. Like, we had Ashton Kutcher at our office. We had Alyssa Milano at our office. We had MC Hammer. Like the reason why we had those connections was because of Twitter. So it's hard to give advice on that, right? I guess. So that was one of the big things that really helped us with marketing, right? Like I don't know what our marketing costs would have been had we not had those advantages. But yeah, I mean, in terms of other things that we tried to do to sort of supplement what we already had, definitely having a piece of hardware that we would give away for free was a big part of it. The amount of pain that we spent getting like the injection molding correct on the size of the reader, like the amount of work we did on a freaking spring so that it would properly push the read head against the credit card. We spent a lot of time on that with the notion that this would ultimately help in terms of having something that's tangible that people can see, and we were hoping that in combination with our existing advantages around celebrity would allow us to get better distribution. I think the thing that really got us customers later on was just identifying where the distribution was within payments. Within payments, there are organizations called ISOs, which stand for Independent Sales Organizations. These are people that like bundle up like a credit card rate, a credit card reading machine, various terminals that might go to the back of the house for a restaurant, and they're heavily specialized to industries. So they may be selling to restaurants, and they'll have a package to sell. And so once we kind of learned how these things work traditionally, we started making appearances at those organizations, into those types of trade magazines. The really interesting thing was that at that, I wonder how well Facebook or like programmatic advertising would have worked for us back then. It didn't work. I mean, it wasn't bad. I mean, things were a lot cheaper back then, so it wasn't bad. But I think the big drivers for us was understanding how the industry worked and just shoehorning a better product into a distribution channel that worked.
Before we get into audience questions, we're a little bit over on time today. I wanted to ask you, when did you leave Square? Why did you leave? What are you doing now?
Yeah, I left Square in September of 2013. I was there for 4.5 years. I was just burnt the hell out. I thought like once we hit 500 people, I would be working less. Part of it was sort of self-inflicted. I joined Square when I was 23. I was actually enjoying much of the learning and just working on stuff, and that was the first exposure I ever had to building a product and then having people like care that the product was either good or bad. And so that was a really inspiring thing. And I have this like crappy gamer tendency where like I need to hit 100% on achievements. And so for me, it's just like I was just like grinding my face off, and that was just not a healthy way to approach like life in general. And so I was probably doing over 100 hours a week for the entire time I was there. That is, as it turns out, is not sustainable. So by 4.5 years in, I was ready for a break. And so that's why I left. What I'm doing today is I'm doing investing. So I'm a general partner at a firm called Greenvisor Capital, early stage fintech investor. I also do angel investing for anything that's not finance related. I became a parent a year ago. And so we've successfully kept this baby alive for 1 year, and super proud of that. Actually, my proudest achievement. And Yeah, now things are, I think, settling down a little bit. So I was telling these guys beforehand, I'm 40, or I'm turning 40 next year. I probably have 3 startups left in me. So yeah, the search is on.
Back your next one.
And before, we do Q&A, since we're at the AI house, I want to ask you, like, what is your, like, for founders, operators, like, how do you view AI as a, as an X multiplier? Like, where do you, and put your investor hat and a founder hat on, right? Like, where do you feel AI can really make a massive impact, right? They say, like, A16Z, I don't know, when investor, there's going to be like a single founder building a unicorn company because of AI. I know there's a lot of, stories like that. Tell us about your view about AI, leveraging AI as an investor and an operator.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a force multiplier for a lot of things. So when Square started in 2009, the big thing was like APIs, right? So you connect to an API and you can like send mail. You connect to an API, you can send an SMS. And like that was like a force multiplier for everybody who's starting new businesses to build stuff faster. I think what AI kind of gives you is like really the classic view of like what the purpose of compute is, which is like a replacement for human labor, right? It's cheap human labor, potentially, right? And so, one of the things that I'd always been disappointed in the world is like, it's 2025, and like doing your taxes is a freaking mess, right? The whole point of all of the compute and all of like the engineering and all the tech that we've built is to make, services more accessible to people, and in my view, we've kind of failed at that, and like humanity has kind of failed at that. Again, it's 2025. Right, people thought we would be, like 2001: A Space Odyssey. We were supposed to be like near Jupiter in 2001, right? It's 24 years later. We're nowhere close to that. So I think a big thing that AI is going to really help on is just human labor. It's not going to necessarily help us get to Jupiter, but for a lot of other things, like one of the ideas that I'm playing with is just like how can we give investment advice better? And a big part of investment advising is analysis, collection of data. And like that's something that's very easy to do now. Like you don't have to build some kind of custom scraper. You just like tell AI to like find me tax brackets in Singapore, in the US, whatever, and you have the data. Give it to me in JSON, great. And now you can immediately operate on that, right? So I think right now the big thing is figuring out how to convert it into product. One of the things that I'm hoping we'll get beyond is right now all of the advertising around AI is like buy our product with AI. Well, we don't advertise things like, oh yeah, like if you buy a product off of Amazon, that came with databases, right? Like it's a tool, it's a means to an end. And so I want us to continue to develop AI. I mean, AI is an amazing field. We need to develop that, but we also need to utilize it to like build services. Like, I don't care if it was built with AI. I just want a service that's high quality and cheap.
And get us to Jupiter, please.
And
I
goes to
want to
Jupiter.
go. I want to go check it out.
Yeah.
We'll take a few questions. We're running a bit behind. I saw your hand up first. I'll run the mic over to you, and we'll take your question first.
So my name is Carl. I work for Gemalto, bringing contactless mobile NFC payment technology to China, working with all the smartphone manufacturers before Apple Pay and before Android Pay. And then I saw your little barcode reader.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. I was giving a presentation in Mandarin in China. I said, look at this thing. There's no damn security. And I'm sorry.
It's true.
And then I said, this will never replace NFC.
Yeah.
Years later, it seems as though you also adopted NFC, and I gave a presentation in Hong Kong 2013 before my 5 years of bringing that technology to China.
Yeah.
I said that somebody will create a POS reader, and in China, what they tried to do with their digital payment scheme is use peer-to-peer payment, transferring with their DCEP. They wanted to do this with post-to-post readers. Basically, you can transfer money, you can transfer anything if you've got the NFC controller and slave chip operating like that. But my question is, sorry for that long
No worries.
dirage. When did you realize what people like me were doing in China, bringing NFC to all the smartphones? When did you realize this thing is never going to be successful when you have an embedded, it's an attached strategy compared to an embedded strategy? Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, so we didn't really care how payments happened. So
My
so-
company did.
Yeah. So the point of the reader, again, like we viewed as a transition, because the first thing we explored was using some kind of OCR, using better security. The reality is, the credit cards just doesn't have a security model in the first place, right? The main problem is not that the reader has no security; it's that the magstripe is totally unencrypted. Like the magstripe, if you put like a cassette recorder like and rubbed against it, you would get a bunch of data that's totally unencrypted. The problem is that it's unencrypted at rest, right? So you can put security onto the reader, but like, who cares? Like you could just make something that looks like the reader and just skim people's credit cards. So I think that was the main issue, and we were totally cognizant of that. The issue was we were launching in the US. The US was not, like even then, I think Europe was using contactless, they were using EMV.
Because all that technology came from Europe.
Yeah.
From the Dutch, the Germans, and the French.
Yeah, and we suffer from a syndrome of like, it was good enough, right? The swipe was good enough, even though it was totally crappy. So I'm with you, the credit card magstripe is like totally crappy. And so this is, by the way, the reason why, the very early iterations of Cash App like existed, because we thought we could do a different type of payment method that didn't depend on magstripes and credit cards. So I'm actually with you.
Let's chat afterwards.
Yeah, let's do it.
Take one more.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for your time. My name's Alejandro. Quick question around going back to the people and the product side, specifically the psychological on-ramps. You kind of mentioned that you guys figured out you needed one to have success. It seems like a lot of AI is just hoping that natural language is that psychological on-ramp. But I have a feeling that we're going to move past that in the future. I'm wondering, like, for new founders, like, how should we think about psychological on-ramps to our products now that we have AI and these new technologies coming online?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I've always, like, with LLMs in particular, I've always thought it's kind of interesting because I love it and I kind of hate it. And the reason for that is, like, when you call into tech support and you go through like the robocall crap, it's like realistically it's often faster to just go through a menu. So in terms of psychological on-ramps, man, I don't know. Let me think on that. Let's talk a little bit later. I'm not sure. I think mainly the idea is to try to bridge the gap from current behavior to how you would like the behavior to exist in the future. So I think one of the advantages for LLMs and how people seem to be using it to replace Google is that it seems to be like people are already asking questions into Google's search box, right? So it's not much of a transition to ask an LLM, but yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really difficult question, and I think it's very case by case. So it depends on what you're building. Yeah.
All right, give it up for Sam. Please.